blocking your creativity. See?
Yeah.
Very different language. So I'm telling you this because this story, I will decode it. I will speak about the symbolic language, but often in these stories, just like in our dreams, the characters and even the locations and the props represent different parts of our psyche. So here's the story. There was once this king who had been on a hunting expedition and had been gone a very, very long time, but it was a very successful hunting expedition. And when the hunters returned, they galloped into the courtyard where the king was greeted, as he always was, by his closest companion, his most loyal subject, the dog that he had raised from the time he was a puppy. But something strange happened. The dog ran up to the hunting party, would get close, then start snarling and barking and spinning around and running away, and then come back and snarl and bark and spin around and running away. And the king said, "Oh my gosh, my dog's gone mad." And he's chasing after the dog through the corridors of the castle. And then all of a sudden, the dog stops abruptly at the entrance to the nursery of the king's firstborn, snarls, barks, spins around, and to his horror, the king sees the dog's muzzle is covered with blood. And when he steps into the nursery, he sees the walls are covered with blood. And there across the way is the infant cradle, totally overturned. Enraged by the betrayal by his best friend, the king immediately pulls out his sword and plunges it into the dog's heart. And right then he hears a cry and he rushes across the room. And there, beneath the carcass of a dead wolf, is his infant child, totally unharmed. Now, this is the worst story ever. If this were a movie, I wouldn't even go see it. It's horrible. It's like, but the reason why it's so horrible is that we can all identify with the king. We know what it's like to say something or do something rashly without pushing the pause button to see what the truth is, and then be horrified at the results that can't be undone. I mean, we've all done that. Like, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. So we can relate to the king not pushing that pause button long enough. So, what part of ourselves does the dog represent in this story? Well, the dog represents our body, right? Our most loyal subject, our most constant companion that will be with us from the day we are born until the day we die, never leave our side, and is always there to protect us and communicate things. But we don't realize this. When we feel like something is wrong, what do? We attack our bodies. We plunge the sword into our own heart. Oh, it's my thighs. Oh, it's my butt. Oh, it's my belly. And viciously, right? I mean, you know what I'm talking about. We all know this. The mean, cruel things we would say, because we haven't stopped to see what is the real problem here. The wolf, okay? Who's the wolf? Now here we have the real culprit with body image issues. And that culprit is the inner critic, right? That it's the inner critic that's causing the problems, not the body. It's the critical thoughts about the body. And this critic, this wolf runs with a whole pack of media wolves, all very happy to tell you that, yes, if you were thinner, you would be happier, you would be more successful, you would be this, that, and the other thing. Why? Because there are people making lots and lots and lots of money off of you trying to get more and more skinny. They have products to sell, and they have diets to sell, and they have cosmetics, and they have weight loss surgery, and they have all kinds of stuff. So they're getting wealthy off of those negative thoughts about your body. Yeah. And the baby, who's the baby in the story? The baby is your true authentic self, what I call your soul self. This is the most precious part of your being. It's the place of your creativity. It's what makes you unique. And so we see from this story, right? This is a way of getting to the truth about what the real problem is and what the real culprit is. And what's required is steadying your awareness long enough to say, what is where am I feeling some pain right now? And am I upset about something my boss said? Or am I hurt about a comment my mother made? Or am I annoyed with something my sister did? Where is it? Stopping long enough rather than automatically, it's my body, it's my thighs, it's my butt, they're too big, it's too, because we're literal. So the body's right there. We think that's the problem. So that's an example of how you would use a story to get to the truth.
Fascinating. That's a very nice story. Thank you for explaining so very well. That helped a lot. Do you think, it's just out of curiosity, do you think that the inner critic, the wolf, ever goes away, or is it our is it just to replace it, or what happens with the inner critic in your idea?
Yeah, it needs discipline, okay? It never goes away, and you don't want it to go away, right? When I wrote my book, I needed my inner critic to make sure it was grammatically correct and the thoughts strung together properly. I needed my inner critic for that. Your inner critic would be good to decide, okay, which is the best kind of dog food that I need to get for my dog or something, okay? But the inner critic's job is never to determine your worth or your value or your identity. That's not his job. So what the inner critic needs is discipline so it stays in its lane. To use another animal metaphor, by the way, the smarter you are, usually the bigger your inner critic. Just so you know that. So if you have a small dog, and you want to discipline it, you can pick that dog up and move it around, right? If it's doing something it's not supposed to, you pick it up and you move it. If you have a big dog, you better discipline that dog so that it sits and it stays and it comes and it stops barking when you say so. So typically people with eating disorders are really bright. They're very bright, sensitive. They pick up on everything. So that means they pick up on all the nonsense of the culture. And unfortunately, they have big inner critics that just aren't disciplined. So that's really the process. And how do you discipline it? By noticing it. Just by noticing it, right? Because if I were to say to myself, oh, Anita, that was such a stupid thing to say. What's wrong with you? If I were to notice myself having that thought, who's the me that's noticing? Right? That's my true self.
Right.
So working with that, learning to notice all the critical comments that you make for yourself is how you develop greater consciousness and how you learn to discipline the inner critic.
Right. Yeah, I mean, aside from, because I also wanted to ask something about dreams, maybe we can do that now because it just seems to fit here. I think it's normal to not really remember dreams very well. At least for me, I think I dream very vividly, and most of the time I can remember for a while, but sometimes I just need to just stand up and go to the bathroom or whatever, and then it's just gone. And then I can't use it. And I think for me, it was very helpful to just connect a bit more with my dream world. But as you mentioned, it's not really easy to understand. Still not. I wouldn't say I'm the best person to understand my dreams, but I think I got a bit better. Is there anything you would recommend when we want to start and want to connect with our dream world?
Yeah, the reason why it's hard for all of us to hold on to our dreams is that we experience them in a different form in our brain. So there are different brain waves, essentially, that dreams are summoned by. So like right now, you and I were talking, we're probably using our beta brainwaves, which is not what you're using when you're dreaming. So that's one of the reasons why it's difficult. And because of that, dreams speak to us, as I mentioned earlier, in symbolic language, which, interestingly enough, though, that is the same language as eating disorders. It's symbolic language. So learning to work with your dreams is valuable in that it's learning that language. So one of the best ways to do it is right when you wake up in the morning. That's when we have alpha waves still humming along in our brain. That's the time to try to capture those dreams. And that's when you're not really awake, but you're not really asleep. It's more of a state of reverie. And so rather than jump out of bed and, okay, I got to get this, I got to get to your list, because that puts you in a whole other mindset, just to kind of just stay in bed a little longer. And it does help even before you go to bed at night, before you go to sleep, just give yourself the intention to say, okay, I want to see what my dreams are going to tell me tonight. So you bring that intention that you're going to pay attention to your dreams before you go to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, or if it's in the middle of the night, just stay there. And just maybe sometimes you'll catch fragments or little wisps of the dream and write them down. Because they, as you know, they will disappear. They're like smoke, right? All of a sudden it's like, wait, what was that? And you're left maybe with the feeling state, but you can't quite get the images. But with practice, you can start to develop this ability to stay in that alpha wave state longer. This is the same kind of state that you can, like when you're taking a long warm shower. And that's where a lot of the times I get a lot of the stories that I use. They come to me because you're more in that, you're alert, but you're not really, checking things off your list.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think in your book and also in your online course, The Light of the Moon Cafe, is that right? That starts in July again? Okay. You're also talking about decoding. So would you say this is something you can really learn? Or, I mean, I know I'm asking for my brain again, but I think very many people are asking the same questions.
Yeah, in fact, I have on my website, lightofthemooncafe.com, I have a quiz you can take. So you can look at the foods that you crave or the foods that you fear, and it'll help you understand what some of those deeper feelings are. So that's a way to get started. And of course, on the interactive course, the New Crescent Moon, that's where I respond to all the comments and all the questions. And so if someone is trying to explore that, I can help in that way. Yeah. But yeah, the idea is there's meaning, there's deep, profound meaning to whatever's going on with you and food. And when you can get to that meaning, it's transformative.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes, at least for me and in my recovery and in my life in general, I was always a bit upset about how society works. There has always been this big part who just wanted to be part of it, of course, just like belonging. And the older I get, I guess, at least sometimes the more disappointed I am about what we are telling ourselves in society. And I was just wondering, is there any definition from your side what being a woman means in this society right now?
Well, I think you get to decide. That's been part of the problem, right? Is other people have decided and told you this is what it means. And so as you claim your authentic self, then you get to decide what the embodiment of the feminine principle, which is not quite the same as being a woman. The feminine principle exists in all of us, whether we're male, female, trans, gender fluid, whatever. And that's the part of ourselves that is emotional, intuitive, instinctual, and relational, as opposed to the masculine side of ourselves that exists. You could call it yin and yang, but I use English to use these terms. And also the reason I use those terms is because in dreams, the masculine principle, the part of ourselves that is logical, linear, goal, achievement oriented, shows up in the shape of the male figure.
Oh, wow.
And the feminine principle shows up in the form of a female. So if you're wanting to look at your dreams to find out what's going on in your psyche in terms of the relationship between your masculine principle and your feminine principle, it will reveal that to you. That's the same as with fairy tales, for example. When I was a young feminist, I got so annoyed because I thought, what is this? All the princesses, they just lie around and they wait for the prince, and then and then I realized, no, that's not what it is. The princesses and the queens and the crones and the witches, they're all aspects of the feminine principle. Just like the kings and the princes and the woodsmen and they're aspects of the masculine principle. So you get to really understand what's going on in your psyche through these stories as well, by noticing how you react to them and what's important about them. So for example, in the story of, we didn't have any female figures in the story about the king and the dog. Right. Well, the dog was feminine. So because the body is feminine, it's the material form, and the king was more the masculine ego mind that wasn't paying attention to what the body had to say, and was looking for what's wrong on the outside. So the masculine principle is outwardly focused. The feminine principle is inwardly focused. So you can start to see, once you understand these principles, that's how they get played out in the stories and in our dreams.
It's very interesting. I didn't know that about a man is for a male in dreams, at least not. That's good. Anything we could, I mean, like a lot, I guess, but anything we could do better when raising children? Well, because I think something must change. I mean, I think my parents already said that, but I guess it's very true, at least for my generation, something must change. And of course, things are changing, but still, it's like, it seems like women do have a lot of freedom, and still there is so much or little power. It's less power than males have. And is there anything we could do better when raising children?
Well, I think helping. Okay, so if you understand that eating disorders, for example, is a form of communication, it's a way of expressing feelings that for one reason or another we cannot put into words, which is why I believe the most important skill, so important that I've seen thousands of people totally recover, but I've never seen anyone recover without the skill of assertive communication. It's that important. In fact, I have a brand new course. It started right now on assertiveness, because I really believe that this is going to bring significant change if we can learn this language, if we can learn this way of communicating, which is the ability to identify, accept, and express your feelings in a way that honors your experience and honors the experience of others. Because if children are taught to communicate their feelings directly, honestly, and kindly, there's no job for an eating disorder. The eating disorder is trying to communicate these things, just like the dog in the story is trying to communicate these things. So for example, if you say, when you leave your towel on the floor, I feel annoyed because it seems like you expect me to pick up after you. That's very different than saying, oh my God, you're such a big fat slob. You're leaving stuff all over the place.
Right.
Because that shuts communication down. And so I think that if parents, well, here's an example. So this changed my life when I learned to speak like this, 40 years ago. So it's that transformative. But one morning I got up and my kids had gone off to school, and there was a note on the counter from my youngest daughter. And she said, Mommy, when you said you would sign my permission slip and didn't, I got mad because you broke your promise. Now, she was communicating assertively. I did not sit my children down and teach them to talk like this. I just talked to them like that. So, even though eating disorders are about food, but they are mostly not about food. It's about communication. And so I think the thing that families could do would be to learn this skill of communicating assertively so that they just do it automatically with their children.
Right. Not just teaching it, also living it, of course, doing the own work
Right.
and then raising a child. Yeah, that makes a
Yeah,
lot of
anyone
sense.
who's been a parent knows that you cannot say, do as I say, not as I do. That never works.
It doesn't. That's right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you for that. I think I just have one more question, and I'm not quite
Mhm,
sure if you've already answered it
mhm.
a bit, but just let's see. Maybe there are a few listeners that realize that they might have some trouble with eating, or maybe it's an eating disorder, maybe it's not, maybe it's just a lot of thinking about food or body or whatever. But they're not in therapy yet. Is there any recommendation how to start this journey?
Yeah, I think you begin with recognizing that there's a reason for it, a reason why you're obsessing about food or your body, or and there's usually a good reason, and and usually it's a way of trying to cope with things that are going on that you're not even aware that the two are connected. So I think to help understand that, I'm going to share my favorite metaphor. It's now my favorite metaphor because I get emails from people all over the world saying, this is my favorite. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, now it's my favorite. And so for this metaphor, you use your imagination. So imagine you're on the banks of a raging river. It's pouring down rain. You slip, you fall in, and you're drowning. You're getting pulled down through the rapids. And along comes a big log, and you grab on. And the log saves your life. It keeps your head above water when surely you would have drowned. And eventually, it carries you to a place in the river where the water is calm and you can see the riverbank, but you can't get there because you're holding onto the log. So now here's the irony: the very thing that saved your life is getting in the way of you going where you want to go in life.
Right.
This is the difficulty with food. It's important to understand it has served a function, it has kept you afloat in some emotionally turbulent times. And maybe those times are now over, but you can't let go of the log, right? And you feel like an absolute idiot because you can't stop doing what it is you're doing. And to make it more complicated, going back to our log story, there's always people on the riverbank yelling, let go of that log, let go of the log, right? And you think, oh my gosh, there's really something wrong with me. I can't stop this. I can't stop thinking about food. I can't stop worrying about my body. I can't stop eating those foods I think I shouldn't be eating. And so everyone says, just stop. And you might say that to yourself.
Mhm.
But the reality is, the way I see it, is letting go of that log may not be the best thing to do initially. Because what happens if you let go of that log, start to swim to shore, get halfway there, and realize, oh, I don't have the strength to make it? That means you don't have the strength to make it back to the log either. And now you're really sunk.
Yeah.
So I happen to believe there's a wise part of ourselves that will not let us let go of anything until we're good and ready.
Mhm.
So once you realize that the struggle with eating or the obsessing about food or your body is serving a function, um, and you're not ready to let go of it, then the question is, okay, well, now what? Going back to our story, well, let go of the log and try floating. And as soon as you start to sink, grab back on. And then you let go of the log and you try treading water. And when you get tired, you grab back on. And then you let go of the log, you swim around it once, grab back on twice, 10 times, 100 times, until you have the strength and confidence to make it to shore. Then you let go of the log. So what this story brings into mind is that it's not just that there's reasons you're doing whatever you're doing with food or thinking about food or whatever, but there are skills that you need so that you don't have to do that any longer. And the skills are media literacy. You have to learn how to look at the messages being given to you from the culture that are lies, that are not true, that are telling you who you are and who you should be, and that there's something wrong with you if you're not, and if you don't look this way, or you don't act this way, or you don't think this way. So you need to really develop that ability to notice those messages. Second is emotional literacy. And that is really learning how to be with your emotions, because we're not taught that. We're taught to control our emotions. Well, guess what? Emotions can't be controlled. That's not their nature. They're energy, and they're designed to flow just like the waves in the ocean. So rather than trying to control your feelings, you need to learn how to ride them like you would ride the waves in an ocean. It's a very different process. So that's what emotional literacy is that understanding that you can't control the feelings that come up in you. You can control how you express them, but you can't control the feelings themselves. They will come in, they will peak, and they will pass. So that's a skill, learning how to ride your emotions, rather than being like the king where you have to act on them right away. No, just feel the feelings, let them flow, and you'll be okay. And then, of course, there is what I had mentioned earlier, assertive communication, because that's where you learn to identify, accept, and express those feelings in the kindest way possible. And a fourth skill is what I call interoceptive awareness, which is the ability to read your body signals, to identify the physical sensation of hunger, where is it in your body, and the physical sensation of fullness, and where is it in your body, because we're taught to ignore those signals. And so those are, I mean, it seems complicated, but you don't have to do it overnight. You can begin by just learning to read your body and ride your emotions.
Yeah, thank you. It's so important, I guess. And by the way, I printed the log as well. It's been like a picture of the log in your online course, and I printed it and I pinned it on my wall as a reminder for a very long time. And I think it's a very good metaphor, of course. So thank you for that. And I think it's so helpful because very many people get frustrated and helpless when they feel like, I really would like to stop, really honestly, but I feel like I can't. And knowing
there's something wrong with me that I can't.
It's just like, I know that, and I want to do it for myself, for my family, for my loved ones, and I just can't. And knowing that we have to replace skills, just learning new ones, and that it takes time. I think when I really and finally got it, it helped in a way to know that I not just had to stop something, but I had to replace it, to use something else, that I wasn't helpless at all, but having something better to use than in this situation, and being able to not just express my emotions differently, but to react on them differently. I think it's a life skill in the end.
It is. You see, this is why when you get on the recovery path and you learn these skills, it transforms your entire life. It's amazing what can happen. And so I think the idea that, there are skills. Most of us are not taught these skills, by the way, right? I mean, so I wish I had learned how to speak assertively when I was a kid, but I was discouraged from that, and then I had to learn it later on. So that often people get caught up in diet mentality, because diet mentality is all about willpower and just don't do it. And it never works. There have been hundreds of studies that show that diets don't work, because what happens with the diet, and everyone who's tried it knows this, is it will activate your inner rebel eventually. You'll be able to go for a while, and all of a sudden the inner rebel comes up and says, no way. And actually that's your best part, because it's your inner rebel that won't let you go down a path that is not your authentic self.
It's a nice.
So people say, oh, well, I sabotaged this. It's like, well, maybe you did, but who was it? What part of you sabotaged it? It's your inner rebel that says, no, you will not be like everyone else. You have your own unique gifts that you've been given, and these are the gifts you've been given, and for yourself and to bring to the world. And no, I'm not going to let you do that.
Yeah,
but we don't realize that.
I like that. That's a nice idea, a nice perception about the inner rebel. Yeah, it fights for us. It really fights for us. That's a good thing. So, well, thank you very much, Anita. It was a real pleasure. And I'm pretty sure that very many people, I feel like everyone knows your book already. So if you ever want to write another one, we would be
I am writing another book. That was one of the gifts of COVID, right? I couldn't go anywhere. And so I thought, okay, how am I going to entertain myself? So I had started that process.
That's good news. I'm so happy to hear that. That's good news.
But I've been busy. Actually, prior to that, most of my writing has been creating new courses at the Light of the Moon.
Maybe you can tell a bit about that.
Yeah, so I have the 3 interactive courses, which is the new crescent moon and the full moon, and then the beauty of the unseen moon. And those are the ones that I am actively involved in. But I have the self-study courses as well, that anybody can take at any time. They don't have to wait for it to start, and you do it all by yourself. And so one is cracking the hunger code, which is finding those metaphors that I talked about. The new one, the brand new one, is how to communicate assertively. And then I'm working on one that I'm really excited about. It's not quite finished, but almost, which is the 4 faces of the feminine. So learning how to identify these different aspects of the feminine principle that exist within all of us, because it seems as though they're restricted to gender and age, but they're not. So the 4 faces that I like to work with are in stories. We see them: the maiden, the mother, the queen, and the crone. And once you understand that these are energetic constellations, if you're 80 years old and need the energy of the maiden to start a new project, and you know what that energy feels like, you can access it. And if you're 18 years old and need the wisdom of the crone, and you know what that energy feels like, you can access that as well. So I'm excited about that one. That's coming down the road. I don't know when it'll get released, but
okay, perfect. That sounds good. I think it would be good to just list in your newsletter, right? Because I think with your newsletter, we're all up to date with all the new courses and news. Of course. Perfect. Okay, I will link everything in the podcast. Thank you very much for being here, for taking the time. I really enjoyed talking to you, and of course your stories. I could listen to them like forever, but maybe it would be a good start for the new course then for me as well. And
and maybe when over time and COVID clears, I could come to Germany.
That would be so great. Yes, because that would be very great. Well, perfect. Thank you for being here, and bye-bye.
Bye.